Greetings from Finland and the No Walls, No Labels Festival. Next up, the Daniel Initiative presents Artists, Athletes and Activism for your viewing pleasure. The Daniel Initiative can best be described as a movement that takes on a business face to reshape a generation. Who is their target audience? You. If you are passionate about your Christian walk and your professional purpose but can't see the connecting line, this movement was built for you. Breon Wells will present Artists, Athletes and Activism. The panel will explore the different ways that influence and artists can use their platforms to inherently push for social justice. Please join the conversation by clicking Zoom on the No Walls, No Labels website.
All right.
And we're on. Nice to see you all. Michael, where do we go from here?
Well, I just want to say thank you all for those that are watching still. Thank you so much. We've been going for a long time. We got more to go. We're so excited to welcome a conversation about art and activism, about a lot of other great stuff. We have Breon from the Daniel Initiative, working in DC on social justice issues, presenting for this panel. So I'm gonna, without further ado, I'm gonna give it over to Breon, and it's all yours.
Absolutely, thank you, Michael, and thank you to the No Labels and No Walls and the We Are One conference. It's definitely a privilege to be able to be here and presenting to you all. I understand that we have a whole bunch of artists and creatives from across the globe who are joining in. And so when I received the call about what this conference was about, it was imperative that we put on a discussion to help us figure out together how we can best use our platforms to affect change. I am Breon Wells from the Daniel Initiative. We are a government relations and strategic communications firm, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. We help what we would call marginalized or multi-marginalized individuals connect to power, connecting governmental structures, right? And so all of this social justice that we see, we help them steward their political and social capital to best affect change. I am excited, like very excited about this panel, and definitely that we put together because it was important for me to gather influencers. We believe at the Daniel Initiative that everybody has a platform, that everybody, whether it be the biggest platform or even something that might be growing or expanding, that we all have an agency and a space to affect change. And so I put this panel together with influencers, people who are known, but people who are also doing the work, who have been involved in intertwining social justice into the work that they do. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce Brittany K. Barnett, social entrepreneur, author, and attorney. Her book, A Knock at Midnight, dropped on September the 8th. Next, I would like to introduce Etan Thomas, a former NBA player, an author, and activist in his own right, specifically in this intersection of activism and athleticism. Next, Ted Wynn, music artist, activist, music business guru, really, in a lot of these spaces. And then finally, Saudia Davis from the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, the director there. And then finally, we have Kyra Stevenson Valley from National Action Network. And so you guys, this conversation, and as the panelists know, I'm very big on conversation. I think we want to invite you to this dialogue that we're having. It was important for me, given the murder of George Floyd, given Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, we saw that spurred a lot of activism, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. And not enough, oftentimes we're not seeing the directly impacted voices of color, people with disabilities, people with the LGBTQ community being able to speak for themselves on this international stage. And so I wanted to contribute to that narrative that there are qualified people that are already doing the work and trying to figure out how we follow their lead and the lead of those that they advocate for. At the start of this conversation, I want us to dream, panelists. And if you are on mute, go ahead and unmute yourself. I want us to dream because I think that in this activism age, we push for change. We even vocalize the change that we need or the demands, but we don't dream often enough and articulate those dreams. And so I want to start really with you, Kyra, since NAN has been the bedrock of activism. Introduce us to who, and what National Action Network is, and then articulate to us what you dream, this world you want it to be.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Breon. Thank you for having me and including Nan on this panel. As Breon said, my name is Kyra Stevenson Valley. I'm a policy advisor at National Action Network. National Action Network is one of our nation's leading civil rights organizations. We were founded in 1991 by Reverend Al Sharpton. And the dream of the organization is a world where justice runs rampant, right? Where everybody is held to the same standard. We are pushing a modern civil rights agenda. We have chapters, over 100 chapters across the United States. We have offices in different cities, and we are really just championing issues around police accountability, specifically right now, and voting rights. Those were the two biggest pieces of our March on Washington that we just held to commemorate the 57th anniversary of the 1963 March. NAN is founded in the spirit and tradition of Dr. Martin Luther King. And for us, it was very important that we commemorate the day that he held and gave his historic I Have a Dream speech, and really bring the country together in the midst of a pandemic to put our dream and the vision that I believe we all have for justice, to stand together and imagine a world where our votes count and are counted equally, and also fight for that world and continue to show up and demand action for that world, and to imagine a world where the police are not held to a different standard because of the color of their uniform or a badge that they hold, but we're all held as equals. And I think that's just a continuation of Dr. King's dream. It's a dream that I hold near and dear to my heart, and just a world where we're treated as equals, honestly.
Absolutely.
I think that's the root.
Absolutely. And Saudia, to you then, and you were first, one of the first on my mind when I looked at this opportunity, because we're talking about a whole bunch of creatives, right? That come with a lot of gifts, a lot of talent, and they're trying to figure out what to do with it. But we're also, as creatives, I'm a songwriter, we're dreamers. So when you dream, what is this world that you're dreaming of? What's the end goal?
Thank you, Breon. I appreciate you inviting me to be a part of this very valuable panel. And I would say that anyone who creates a business of any kind, it starts with a dream. And I am, as you mentioned, the director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. Can you hear me okay?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We can hear you.
So I'm the director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, which is the nonprofit arm of 2112, which is the largest creative co-working space and creative incubator in the world. And we say that proudly because no other incubator works in the fashion that we do and spans the creative industries. And in order to answer your question properly, I just want to put a little context for our viewers. So here at 2112, it's 160,000 square feet, which is represented by the music industry with Fort Knox recording studios, the Hangar, which is 7,000 square feet of filmmaking space, and then 2112, which represents everything from packaged goods to, artist management and attorneys for artists, including producers for film, fashion, you name it. So we sit within 20,000 of that square footage. So as creators, it all starts with a dream. And part of the dream that I have, and I'm fortunate to work for an organization that not only fulfills the dream that I have which is, not only to live out an idea, but to amplify that. So as a producer myself, I believe in storytelling. And right now, the narratives have been so negative around Black and Brown people historically that personally, part of what my dream is to help shift and shape that narrative of negativity to positive. So with the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, we represent 9 industries of creative sectors, right? And so whether we're talking about music that has a positive inspiration, or it's a film, again, or a commercial, right? When we talk about marketing and media, how do we support those companies? We do it with resources, funding opportunities, making sure contracts are intact, anything from marketing. We actually help to engage those companies, make sure that they have the proper resources to be that dream that they have for themselves in their company, and then amplify it. And this is a global initiative. So the dream is big, but I believe in reaching for big challenges, much like my friend Etan Thomas, who's on here. We were talking earlier, and I'll just say this, in terms of athletics, right? Sports is also one of our 9 industries. And when we talk about the endurance and what an athlete has to do to endure and get through to achieve a dream, that may be winning a game, that same skill set is really valuable in the creative industries, because as you all know, all of our industries took a hit with COVID.
Right.
So it also, that agility and being able to shift, shape, and move is also so important. So thank you. I hope that answers your question.
It does, absolutely. Brittany, again, I'm always, and as we talk often, I'm in amazement of your journey, because, even for years, you've been using this phrase, there's nothing more urgent than freedom and liberation. And you may not say this, but you and your co-counsel had gotten 51 plus people out of prison at the federal level that had life without parole. Digging in. And so obviously there's a dream that you have with this, right? What does liberation look like to you? What is this dream of that you're obviously working towards, that you want to see this world become?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to hearing from everyone on the panel today. When I first started this journey for freedom, when I first coined the phrase, there's nothing more urgent than freedom, for me, it was about saving people serving excessive sentences in prison. So it was about the carceral nature of the system. And the more I've done this work for several years now, the definition of freedom for me has evolved. Mm-hmm. And we have to keep getting people out of prison, but we can't keep rescuing people from prison, Breon, and restoring them to poverty. And so a question that I'm pondering lately as what is freedom and liberation for me is, how do we create sustainable liberation? For me as a social entrepreneur, I'm always looking for ways to not just get people out of prison, but to invest in the ingenuity that's untapped of people in prison or formerly incarcerated people. How do we get them in ecosystems where they're no longer trying to survive, but to thrive because they have access now to these capital and resources? So freedom for me has evolved so much. Liberation for me has evolved so much to beyond bars. It's the economic liberation, it's freedom. As you mentioned, I had a book come out last week. So it's freedom to tell our own stories.
Yep.
History shows the damage, when we leave others to tell our stories. And so that freedom to tell our own stories, that freedom to just be pure and authentic in who we are as people in the movement, to really break chains. And when I say break chains, I mean it in every sense of the word.
Absolutely. Ted, I knew of you definitely on the singing side as a musician with Ted and Sherry in the group. And then I got exposed to the music business side, because you give a lot of sound counsel. And, you know, I think for those creators that are out there, all contracts aren't good contracts. Make sure that you have some representation that is out there. But what I didn't know up until recently was the extent to which you've been in activism, and infusing your kind of art and activism together. You know, kind of talk to us about what you dream, why you're doing this, and just kind of how that transition, if it was a transition, how that happened.
Well, I think that thank you again for the opportunity to share on this panel and have this conversation. For me, it's really, you know, for all those creative persons who've spoken before and those who will speak after me, it really is, I mean, when you're creating art, you are literally creating something that doesn't exist or hasn't existed. So it's a very imaginative space. And I think for me, being an artist and a songwriter, you know, I listen to music all my life, and music is storytelling. And so when you think about what is possible, as I've thought about music or film or television or whatever it is, you start to think about what you see, what you hear, and then the lived reality that is the experience of actual people. And sometimes those things are not the same. And so as we think about issues around marginalization, whether it be racism, sexism, homophobia, transphobia, xenophobia, whatever the list is, to not, you know, not as eloquent as the ladies who've spoken before me, but it's just kind of like, it's just dumb.
Right,
you know,
right,
honestly,
right.
like racism is really, it's just dumb. Like when you think about what it's built on and the lunacy that is a part of the calculus that gets people to that place, it's something of a ridiculous nature. You think about how we are much more alike than we are different. And so for me, as a person who creates music and represents songwriters, et cetera, I try to think about what I dream of is a space where those things are non-factors, and we allow people to exist and show up and present in whatever way works for them, and whatever way they feel comfortable, whatever, you know, verbiage they want to use, however they want to identify themselves, because what difference does it really make to you, right?
Right.
And I think that as we're having these conversations, and for me, it's been transitional because my background starts in gospel music, so there's a religious background, and so there's even some deconstruction I had to do as a thinking person who was given a certain set of beliefs that I've had to deconstruct and reform my own ideas and understand what works for all people. When we talk about equity and justice, and the young lady who talked about the prison system, I mean, I think the work that you've done is outstanding, because I tell people all the time, it is easy to be lackadaisical about things when it's not your situation. But when you are locked in a cage for an indefinite period of time, that's an emergency. And you want action, and you want it right now, right? Because your life is slipping away, and time is something that we can never get back. Right.
Yeah.
So that's why we think of it. I think of it as currency, thus the phrase, how we spend our time. And so I think that for those of us who are on the planet at this point, it's important to be intentional about what we do and how we do it, and to work for a world and a space that is safe for everybody to live and to exist and to show up. And to that end point, I am finishing right now a social justice album that has, that has some exciting collaborations with some R&B artists, PJ Morton and Tweet, Layla Hathaway, et cetera, to really address some things kind of head on that we don't really talk about in music, in ways that, will be, it will provoke some people, right? Because some of the stuff is pretty provocative. You know me, I'm straight, no chaser. So it's just going to be what it is. But I imagine a place where we can all live together. We won't all agree, but we can all be respectful. We can all honor people in their truth and create a safe space for people to exist.
Absolutely. I believe that an important part of this dialogue is honesty. And we're about to have that honest dialogue. I wanted us to start with dreaming. And so before we shift to that honest dialogue, Etan, you and I think it was 2017 at the Congressional Black Caucus, And I and Congressman Hakeem Jeffries had put together this Athletes and Activism panel.
Okay.
And at that time, you were working on the book We Matter, I believe. It had either come out or was about to come out. And it was the first time that I saw someone actually articulate, who was an athlete, like this nexus that we don't study enough. And yet we see now today Naomi Osaka, we see LeBron James, and the work he's doing in voting rights. We've seen even in soccer, some of those in soccer internationally, some of these assumptions being challenged and athletes using their voice in different ways and in more an amplified way than they have before. As one who I would say has been at the forefront of these conversations, what do you dream of?
Well, and thanks for having me be a part of this discussion. It's amazing to see the way that athletes are using their voices and finding their voice right now in this day and age, just across the board. It's really great to see. Because there's such a strong voice. You mentioned the Congressional Black Caucus, and I'm someone, I live in DC. I play with the Washington Wizards, so I've been a regular at the Congressional Black Caucus, or done work with NAN up in New York,
right,
and done work with NAACP. So I've been in those spaces, and one of the things that I've always done is try to encourage a lot of the grassroots organizations to connect with athletes, to be able to work together to push for things, to kind of to move along, because the fact is that athletes have a strong voice. And it's been like that historically. Now, of course, everyone needs mentoring and being shaped. And because a lot of athletes, they want to be able to speak on different topics and make a difference. And they have to be connected to grassroots people who are doing the work to make the difference. So it's a great connection to be able to have. But you just saw today with Maya Moore, the WNBA player, and she worked hard to get the brother freed, and he had 50 years. He was so it's now it's a beautiful story, because now they got married, and everything like that, and it's talking about true love, but really it should point out the problems with the justice system, where if you don't have the finances and the economic wherewithal to be able to push to see that there was something done wrong. There's so many people falsely accused who are in the system right now and shouldn't be in the system. But if you don't have the funds to be able to formulate the dream team, to be able to look at all the facts and uncover all the different inaccuracies and things where even DNA testing, just going down the list, they stay in jail. So that should be really, that's what that case highlighted, because literally he was facing 50 years. So kudos to Maya Moore to be able to, be focused on that to the point where now he is free. But that should show the problem that we have in the justice system. So right now, when you have a LeBron James talking about the issues that are going on with police brutality, and you have all the different players in the NFL and everybody, you have a large group of fans, of white fans, that don't want to hear that. But now they're being forced to hear it, because they're doing it at the game, at the press conference. We're going to make you hear this and understand that this is an issue it's a beautiful time to see athletes using their platforms the way they have been.
Absolutely. I'm gonna throw this out to all of the panelists, and whoever wants to jump in this and get in where you fit in, as we say, question. But let's go there in honesty. Let's talk about the risks associated with influencers using their platform, right? Eton, in 2017, I think you wrote something to the effect of, everybody agrees, or everybody wants the athletes to use their voice up until they disagree with them, right? Which was the main point. And that same thing can be said of artists. That same thing can be said, anybody with a platform, you're like, that's how we end up with these shut up and dribble moments. That's how we end up with, I can remember hearing and seeing on the news, Kim Kardashian being not only in one sense, getting Alice Johnson free, and being used to help, do that, but then also getting this backlash of who does she think she is? And so let's talk about that risk that's involved with that. How did we come about that? Why do we think that is in existence as it is?
I'll go. This is Brittany. I'll go real quick. And it's part of speaking to the whole Kim Kardashian situation, because I was one of the lawyers on Alice Johnson's case. And so I saw a lot of the behind the scenes, and I received, firsthand backlash from working with him and being a part of that. And what people don't know is I've known Alice Johnson for over a decade, and it was, people were so blinded by Kim Kardashian's spotlight that they failed to look past that to see the 64-year-old woman set to die in prison for drugs. And so as part of it for me, it's just, I think as a society, it's kind of an indictment on society, right? Like, why are we so obsessed with celebrity influence and involvement that we can't really see the true issue here? So the options that were there, and I'll say that we had, because I was a part of that team, was, okay, Kim goes and we educate her to go and have this discussion, or Alice Johnson dies in prison. So as a society, which option would people have preferred that we pick? Yeah,
good point. Somebody else?
I can add to that. That's definitely true, though. A lot of times when somebody is a celebrity is speaking on an issue, what happens is, if you agree with the celebrity, then it's like, oh, wonderful, look at this celebrity that is saying all these great things. Let's praise them. Let's have them on our shows and everything like that. But then if you disagree with them, then it's, oh, they need to stay in their lane. They're just a basketball player, or they're just a singer. They're just a model. They're just an actor. They don't know what they're talking about. And that's the part where it's hard for us as a society right now to just say that we disagree, or even to be able to respectfully disagree, or as President Obama used to say, disagree without being disagreeable. So, it's one of those things where, I had a thing where Drew Brees made a statement a few months ago in his opinion about the, NFL players taking a knee. So I respectfully disagreed with him, and I wrote an article about it. And, I worked, my manager, Jay Thompson, is all with the restorative practices and using the language that is not combative and everything like that. So, there is a way to be able to say things without being combative. And the problem is, whenever you disagree with somebody now in society, then they start attacking people personally. And you're not even talking about the topic anymore. So we should be able to have public discourse, you know what I mean? And that's where you have an exchange of ideas. But first, you have to be able to value someone's opinion if it's different than yours. And that's where, as far as artists, athletes, that's the problem that a lot of times we're faced with.
If I can,
go ahead, and then Ted.
Briefly on this, and that is I feel like we sit in the middle of kind of where innovation happens, right? And when things start to shift. And one of the things that we're seeing is that with this public discourse now, with people taking to the streets and protesting, that, well, let's backtrack real quick. With COVID, advertisers, marketing individuals started to become more interested in personal stories, okay? So we're shifting, there's a shift that's happening away from influencers. And then with, the public murder, what I call public lynching of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, with people taking to the streets, multicultural, every race represented, creating this public discourse, advertisers and those who would before not consider the personal voice, the independent voice, is now looking at personal stories. There's a shift where influencers, type of influencer, right? Celebrity influencers are being looked at. And let's just make the quick distinction between a celebrity and those who started influencing based on what product they were showing, right? Like, some of that is now being considered disingenuous. And so right now there's more of a push to real stories, real people, what the is going on. And I think now we can start having these conversations out loud without people being blacklisted, because people are ready to absorb what's really going on and maybe shamed if they're not willing to absorb it.
Okay, Ted, and I want you to answer this question, but before I want to ask this question to you specifically then too. part of my problem, I think, with the backlash against these influencers, I do think, to Eton and Brittany's point, their nexus was they had a team, right? Kim Kardashian and some of these people, they weren't just out there freestyling. They had a team where they were leading on the experts like Brittany, or Eton was leaning on Jay and people who were competent in the movement. But on that counter, I have a problem with this sense of we like them for their athleticism or for their gift, but it almost feels dehumanizing to me. We want them to like deny their self, parts of their self that's integral in this space. Am I missing that? What's going on here? What's at play?
I don't think you're missing it at all when we have to look at the premise of this. Black bodies have been commodified in America since the inception of this country, period. And so you've not seen, Black voices looked at for leadership in those types of ways in a mainstream, broad kind of way. And so when you are entertaining, it's fine, right? And we respect you in that space because people feel like that's what you do well, but you don't do this well. And right. at the end of the day, whether you are an athlete or an artist, or it doesn't matter, you're still, number one, a human, and you're a citizen. And so because you are a citizen of this country, you have the right to say what you feel, especially when you see things that you feel like are wrong, things that are happening that are harming people in this country. And so to the point of disagreement, I don't know it verbatim, but I am more along the lines of James Baldwin. He said we can agree to disagree, still love each other, unless it is rooted in my oppression and denial of my humanity and right to exist. Right. Then we have a problem. And I think that's kind of the crossroad that we are at in this moment, right? Yep. We're not talking about big government, small government, high taxes, low taxes. We're talking about, do I have the right to, go outside of my space, my home, and come back, without being shot or harmed or, what have you, by people who were supposed to be protecting and serving. We're talking about, do I have the right, to have equal treatment in every space? Do Black women have the right to go to the doctor and not be 3 times likely to die in childbirth? We're talking about things that are existential threats to our existence as a people. And so that's a different type of thing to disagree about. So we can disagree again about, Brandy Monica, right, all day. But when it comes to, Patty Gladys, whatever works for you, that's a very different idea, conversation than, do I have the right to live, and do I have the right to not be imprisoned wrongfully, and then because I don't have resources, I can't have, a fair trial, which I'm guaranteed per the Constitution. So I think that there is some nuance to that conversation. And so when we're in this moment, I think you are seeing a level of discourse that is heated and a little bit more intense, because we are literally screaming for our lives in this moment.
Yeah. Kyra, I'm gonna start with you on this next question, but it's again open to everybody. So a New York Times article was dropped literally last week, that stated that even though we see diversity, increasing in the United States, which I would say we've always been diverse by face since the beginning of this country, but even though diversity might be increasing, the face of power in the United States is 80% white and predominantly white male. My spidey senses tell me, if we were to step outside of this country and look even across the globe, that number would be similar, if not maybe higher in spaces. And so I want us to kind of contextualize that statistic, first of all, that when we're talking about the face of power, this article is talking about not just government, but who has green light in Hollywood, who has the ability in the owner's box in athletic spaces to make these changes that are necessary. It was pointing towards in private sector and in tech and in these VCs, like that's owned. It's 80% white and mostly male. Talk to us, Kyra, about the importance of diversity in the space that and everybody else from your space, the importance of like really breaking those chains and providing access and pipelines.
Definitely. I think that statistic, it's not surprising, but it is disappointing. I think we've seen, especially with the 2018 election in the government space, more diversity, but there's still so much work to be done. it's important that we can see ourselves in these places, not just we can attain and ascend to those levels, but also because when you are in that space, you are inherently connected to your community. You're inherently bringing a different perspective. So one thing I always say on the Hill is that we need more diverse staff making legislation, supporting members of Congress, but we also need more diverse members of Congress who are pushing these laws and championing what we need legislatively in our country, so we can move from demonstration to legislation and have concrete laws that we can rely upon. But that also, like you said, Breon, is important in the business sector, where you are bringing folks in. And I know, for example, Nan is very heavily invested in the financial services piece and looking at pensions and who gets to run the big pensions that people who look like me and a lot of the folks on this panel paying into, but the asset managers who are managing the pensions don't look like us. And so what that means is the money isn't being invested in our communities. What it means is the money isn't being given to Black-owned businesses, usually because they don't see us in the same ways. They're connected to different circles. They're not bringing in these diverse opportunities and these diverse experiences that would allow for a more equal society, and it kind of continues to perpetuate wealth gaps in safety. I know one of the things we've been saying a lot this summer is, and a lot of people have been saying in part of the conversations, is it's not just funding the policing that will keep our community safe. It's also looking at what public safety is at a whole and really thinking about what investing in these communities looks like, what investing in healthcare looks like, what it means to have doctors who look like you, who are servicing you. Because we've seen the mortality rate with Black women be way higher in the United States than across the world, but just the difference in how Black women are treated when they're seeking medical attention matters, and it transcends up into like who's hearing you, who's seeing you, who can communicate with you. I think we've seen some viral tweets that people are saying, like, just hearing having a doctor that looks like you will increase your quality of care, because there are like social nuances and different nuances to how you're communicating that they'll pick up on when you're feeling uncomfortable. And you know, there are gaps there, and it's important that we're filling gaps. It's important that we're having diversity at every single level across the spectrum in these different spheres. So we both know that we can get there, but also when we're in those spaces, we're creating products and we're bringing opportunities and investing in the communities that need them the most.
Yeah, Brittany, I want you to answer this question too, because I know you and I talk a lot about liberation, collective liberation, right? This thought that none of us are free until all of us are free. And so for like, one of the things we often talk about is liberation is not complete until the directly impacted in whatever space, whether you're talking about in America, you know, Black folks and brown folks, if you're talking about the Roma in Europe, if you're talking about those that are, you know, immigrants, you're talking about LGBTQ, the empowerment chain is not complete until they have that access upward. The reason I want you to answer this, you have been doing intentional work empowering the directly impacted to speak for themselves, even with like your co-founders of the Buried Alive Project. So kind of talk to us in response to this article on why it's important for the directly impacted. What does that look like, them speaking for themselves?
Yeah, you know, it's crucial for the directly impacted to be leading in their own liberation. You know, no one can tell my story better than me. No one can tell your story better than you. And the same for them. You know, with the Buried Alive Project, a nonprofit I co-founded, we provide pro bono legal representation for people serving life without parole sentences for federal drug offenses. But I co-founded organization with two of my personal clients, Sharonda Jones and Corey Jacobs, who were serving life without parole for drugs and graciously granted clemency by President Barack Obama. And they had such a survivor's remorse because they had served decades with people who they felt were just as deserving of this freedom as they were. And so putting our heads together, we created this Buried Alive project, but I couldn't do it without them. Their experience, their wisdom and advice is embedded in the very fabric of what we do at the Buried Alive project, you know, and it's just crucial to have that expertise at the table when it's involving issues, especially when it's involving issues surrounding them. I think with criminal justice reform, as we speak on activism and athletes and influencers, criminal justice is so fashionable these days. It's popular, it's a hot topic. But what amazes me is how, even with it being such a hot topic, how little people actually know about how the system works. And so it goes back to what everyone was saying before, that educational aspect and connecting with grassroots organizations. And that education, a lot of that education is going to come from directly impacted people.
Right. Before, and anybody else who wants to jump in, but let me just say this here. We are about to shift in about 10 minutes to our Q&A from the crowd. So if you have any questions, please put them in the chat, send them to the No Labels, No Walls team, and we'll make sure that we get them so that we can answer your questions. Anybody else want to get in on that question?
I think it's important, as Brittany just said, to talk, when we talk about like people who are directly impacted. I've been having conversations for a while about sexism. And I am, you know, a Black man who was raised by Black women, my mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother specifically. And one of the things that I've learned is the importance of actually listening, because sometimes we move into situations that we do good work, but we don't really understand the nuances of what people have to deal with. And so I'm not a Black woman, right? And so I don't know what that is to live in that space every single day.
Right.
There's a young lady by the name of Shonda Chapman who works at the Very Institute, and I did an interview with her on my podcast. And one of the things that she said was, you know, something as simple as when she leaves the house in New York and she's walking, she knows she has to walk somewhere. She thinks about what she's wearing, which route she's taking, because she gets catcalled sometimes. And I've, as a man, I've not had to ever think about that. And I think that when we talk about these things, we do have to be sensitive and listen and learn from people who have these lived experiences. Jane Fonda was on The View recently and had an exchange with Joy Behar about the phrase defund the police. And Joy Behar was saying, well, you know, it's problematic for some people. Why can't we say this? And Jane Fonda said, listen, I'm paraphrasing, but we are two white women. We don't get to tell Black Lives Matter what language to use. If we're going to be allies, we have to learn to listen to what they're saying and see how we can be supportive. And I think for every marginalized group, that same thing is true. If you're going to work with them, if I'm listening to women and I want to work to deconstruct misogyny and sexism and patriarchy, then I have to listen to women and take my cues from them to understand what works best to achieve their goal. Right?
Yes.
They have their own agency, and we have to respect that as we are partnering with whomever it is in order to achieve that goal.
Yeah. I would also say, based on those numbers and the statistics, thank you, that if we were to look at just the systematic structure, if we look at the entertainment industry, I was literally just in a conversation, and Ted, Wynn, I mean, you're in the music business, and there are three organizations that control all of the music industry. So if we look at, when we're talking about power, it's associated with money, okay? If we go to film, there's 4. But let's talk, I mean, I could say who those 3 are in music, right? Universal, help me out, Warner, and Sony, right? And so as musicians, that's a whole nother talk. But if we look at that structure and then who's impacted, which are the musicians, I wouldn't say that it's definitely that different. So we're talking about systematic, where it plays out in different aspects of our lives, but it's then represented by how it's represented. So I just want to, because it's connective tissue that impacts the industries that we work in as well.
Right.
Same framework.
Yeah.
Let's switch the game. How about that? So I gotta say, I mean, that's part of why we exist, is to level the playing field. Incubators, how many creatives know, one, about incubators, where
Right.
there's a place where you can go and learn financial literacy. We didn't know that. We went to college, we got there, our parents expected us to do the rest, right? So we're in a position now to level the playing field by educating creators on all aspects of business. And I think that ultimately that's how we change the game. And I've got to say one more thing real quick to Brittany.
Absolutely.
So we are in the process of creating an online educational platform. There's the learning aspect, there's the assessment, what did you get from it? There's a certificate, and then there's the workforce development, connecting with jobs and opportunities to make money. Within film, specifically on the production side, those are 6-figure and 7-figure positions, okay? Our industries tend to be more forgiving to returning citizens, all keywords, right, Brittany? I have a personal passion that platform be used within prisons to give individuals an opportunity to learn, take those assessments, and then have a direct pipeline into workforce once they come out. And it's a personal thing that I have. So anyways, I just wanted to share that, because even frame makers for the visual arts, that's an 8-figure position. That's wealth changing, generational wealth changing. So it's really about information, Breon, when it comes down to it. It's like there are roles that our people across the board can do, and people just don't know about it. So
right.
It's important
to connect with you. I would love to connect with you after this to learn more. That's phenomenal.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Etan, again, your book, We Matter, and I was combing through it. I've read it before, but I was combing through it, and I landed upon chapter 4, which was talking about police brutality and how, the personal experience that you even had, as you articulate in this book, with police brutality. And standing against police brutality matters was literally, I think, like the title of that chapter. Talk to us, yes, from the athletic space, but even broader. Why would you say the voices of athletes, influencers, generally, artists matter in these social justice spaces?
Well, I think they matter because, quite frankly, a lot of white America don't believe Black people when they say that it's as bad as it is. And so they listen to LeBron say it, and they believe, okay, so LeBron says, because they're fans of LeBron. And that's one of the things in my book, as I was going in different universities before COVID, before COVID shut everything down, but going to different universities, having these different talks and everything, a lot of the feedback that I was getting was that from the white students, that they were so shocked and so surprised that somebody like Russell Westbrook, feels unsafe for, Carmelo Anthony and, Dwayne Wade, because they think of athletes as in this protective bubble. Like we're not regular Black people, we don't have to deal with the things that regular Black people have to deal with. This just protection. So we're talking about how, every time something like this happens, we're afraid for our children. And we have to have these conversations with our children about how to de-escalate a situation when you didn't escalate it in the first place, and how it could be a matter of life and death. And you're hearing Dwayne Wade say that. You know what I mean? You're hearing athletes say that. It resonates more with a lot. And that's the feedback that I was getting. And on some point, you're like, it shouldn't be like, you shouldn't have to hear LeBron say this to be able to know that all other Black people are telling the truth. You know what I mean? Oh, so now you hear LeBron say it, and so now, it's an issue because, and it shouldn't be like that. But unfortunately, that is the way that it is. So what I'm doing with this book and utilizing these voices is for them to be able to magnify an issue that has been an issue for decades, but other people hear it differently because athletes are saying it. And now being able to take that now that you have their voice, now to push for change and all the different ways you can push. So there's one thing to create awareness, and that's great. You know what I mean? But then you have to go that extra step to push for change. And that's what it's all about.
And to what I got to say this real quick, Breon, I know we're going to touch, but to what Etan said, we created a video. right? Because it's not about, it's also like, do you see me, right? They see the athletes, but the average person, do you actually see? And I'd be happy to share it if you'd like.
Absolutely. Go ahead and share that.
Okay. Oops. I did it too quick. Hold on. Here we go. I'm going to share my screen, everybody.
Do you see me? Do you see my talent? Do you see my tenacity? Do you see my creativity? Do you see my pain? Arts, culture, entertainment, and media can heal all of us. It's time to move forward. And here's what you can do. See yourself with us as we craft the solution. Be engaged, get involved, get connected.
So that provided a call to action into, especially what, Mr. Thomas, thank you. It's like, okay, we can talk about it, but what are we asking people to do? And I think at the end of the day, we need to be really clear on what we're talking about, because we are in like a moment here. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Yeah, before I shift to the questions, we have a few questions that are here. And actually, I'm gonna start with you, Marcus, from No Label. I want you to verbalize, your question. But before then, I wanted to say this. I had the privilege of growing up as an Air Force brat. And so I was born in Spain, lived in Turkey, lived in Germany, lived in England. And one of the many things that it helped me understand is that this pain is global. But also, and the reason I wanted to focus this nexus on the pain of Black America is because race is a social construct that was long in existence before this country existed. And yet we see that across the globe, people are taking their lead from like the Black Lives Matter protests and taking their lead from these other spaces and finding inspiration and hope. And so my thought automatically goes to like the Roma across Europe and the other people who are invisible seemingly, or, as I like to say, it's not like there was a lack of diversity even in this country. It has always been a lack of access to power. And so, I want the people that are attending to think about, you don't always have to do the next big thing and come up with this next big project, but how are you making space where you do have access for other people that don't look like you, that didn't share the same experience, to access these spaces of power for liberation. So with that, I'm gonna open up. Marcus, would you start us off with questions?
Thank you so much. So my name is Markus Raivi. I'm the director of Kukunori NGO in Finland, Helsinki. We're representing 41 member organizations, about 17,000 people suffering from mental health issues and injustice in different kind of ways. And I have a question. What I'm thinking about, because we are making social innovations with different kind of models to work with people, with artists, and with whoever. And I think that we are actually the dream creators. That's our main job, as you were starting from the dreams. Mm-hmm. And what I'm thinking that is that my dream is that everybody could have a possibility to think that there's always a promise about the better future for him and for his family and his community. But we are always forgetting that decision makers who I meet weekly, I can see that they have lost their dream that they can make a change. So I'm thinking about what is the artist's responsibility to use all our things that we can do, with music and athletes and whatever, to really make them dream that they can actually make make a difference. The congressman and the decision makers can make a difference, because I think they lost hope for themselves. That whatever they're trying to do, they're not getting it through, and they're getting a little bit like cynical kind of attitude.
Yeah.
And then they don't get the message through anymore. Can you see what I mean? What could we do as an artist to make them to believe in themselves and the change they're trying to make?
Okay, and I'm panelist, because it looks like we have 2 more questions. What I'm gonna do is ask these other 2 as well, and we'll answer them, rapid fire, as whichever one of you wants to address these. Thank you for that question, Marcus. We have another question, which is, I recently read an article by Coleman Hughes called "The Case for Black Optimism," which stated that there have been increased bachelor's degrees, reduced incarceration rates, and that mortality rates have shrunk in the Black community in the US since 2000. He asks then, when was the last time you heard good news about Black America? The question is this: do you think that this narrative of progress is underplayed, or that he is taking focus away from the very real issues that Black Americans face? That is question number 2. There was one more question. Oh, no, there was not a question. Sorry, that was a comment. So let's start with Marcus's question. Who wants to take that on how we as artists, as creatives, can help inspire even these policymakers who may have lost hope? Go ahead, Ted.
I think that, my answer is going to be maybe interesting. I think that part of the problem for me is that we have to, start at the foundational level. And I think that, especially in US elections or people who have federal positions, I think a lot of people are there too long. I think that's why you see some people lose hope, because I don't know what the goal is or what the agenda is at a certain point in time. And so I do think that those of us who are artists and anybody who has a platform, whether it's 1 people or 1 million people, should help to educate everybody in our sphere of influence about the importance of politics, the importance of voting, and to be specific, the importance of local politics. Tip O'Neill years ago said all politics is local. And I think that that's a very, very important thing that we do not think about. I live in Atlanta. If I get pulled over by the APD, it doesn't matter who's in the White House. They're going to deal with me according to what the laws are in that particular space. So we have to really have more conversation around that. And I think that we have to also be very intentional about supporting candidates who are optimistic, who can change, who can see change, and who are actually not fighting for more status quo, safe kind of, I don't want to upset people policies, but things that are going to actually really impact the lives of people who are dealing with real problems. And I keep going back to Brittany. I'm definitely getting your book today too, because I think that kind of work is so important, because that's a real experience. Like, the incarceration rates in this country are astronomical. And you have people who are in these positions, and it's mostly, I won't say mostly, a lot of it is an issue of classism, because people don't have the means in order to do what they need to do. And that shouldn't be a determinant, like whether you have money or not, should not determine whether you have fair legal representation, or if you're locked up for something that you didn't do, or in prison too long for something that's, minor. So I think that we can help politicians and those who are in positions of power to make choices that benefit us and be optimistic if we are more involved in the process, and we actively support people who really can reimagine what society needs to look like.
Absolutely.
Daniel, we have, just so you know, we have about 2 minutes.
Absolutely.
For the streaming, but here's the thing, and it's up to everybody on the panel here and talking, because we're just now getting into questions. This is all going to be recorded, so we can continue if you like, and then we'll make the video. So it'll be recorded if people have more questions, or we can end it in 2 minutes and then continue later on. It's up to you, Breon.
Okay, I will open up to address this other question, because we only had one other question, and then I will close. Absolutely. And look, I was getting thumbs up by some of the other attendees that they want to hear more. So let's go ahead. This fire panel. This question, the other question was on narrative. Do we feel that given that there has been an increase in bachelor's degrees, reduced incarceration rates, and that the mortality rates have shrunk in the Black community in the US since 2000, do we feel that this narrative of progress is underplayed, or that it is taking focus away from the very real issues that Black Americans face? And I'm gonna throw this out there before y'all go ahead and jump. I automatically